Yeah. I will call the December 3rd, 2020 Planning Commission meeting to order. Will everyone please rise, and will Commissioner Lowry lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. Staff, please roll call.
All commissioners are present this evening.
Okay, this is a public comment. This is the time for public comments on matters that are not on the agenda, that are generally within the purview of the Planning Commission. If you wish to speak, please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. You can call in at 949-270-8165 to provide public comments on non-agenda items. First, I'll go to the community room. Do we have any public comments in the community room? All right, thank you. Do we have anyone on the phone wishing to give public comments? I have one. Remember to mute your television, as there is a 30 or a 40-second delay.
Yeah, hold on.
Okay, you're on. If you wouldn't mind muting your television, please.
Are you talking to me? Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, hi, my name is John DiGiovanni. I'm a business owner in Newport Beach for almost 30 years, but tonight I'm speaking as a homeowner of 3800 Channel Place on Newport Island. Specifically, I'm here to speak against the Newport Island. Yes.
Sir, that is an agenda item that's coming up in a few moments. Is there a way to place him on hold? You'll have to call back under that item because it's that's a specific agenda item. Yes, this is just a public comment that are not before our agenda. Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Is there any other caller? Okay, great. I'll move to requests for continuances. Staff, are there any requests for continuances?
Mr. Chairman, there are no continuances requested.
Okay, great. I'll move on to the consent items. That's item number 1, minutes of the November 19th, 2020 meeting. If you want to comment on this item, please call 949-270-8165. And I do believe there's some edits from Mr. Moser. And I'll go to the public community room. Are there any comments there? Seeing none, are there any on the phone? Okay. Call for a motion or a second.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with Mr. Moser's comments.
Great.
I'll second that.
Perfect.
The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, great. We'll move on to our discussion items. Item number 2, the circulation element update status report. The site location is citywide. Staff, please provide us a presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to give you a brief status update on the circulation element. I do have a real brief presentation. As you recall, on November 19th, we had a study session here. And it was really just sort of an introductory session that the traffic engineer provided. On November 23rd, we had our first circulation element virtual workshop with the community. We had roughly 30 participants on the call. And again, it was a similar content, if you will, but we also provided an opportunity for public dialogue, so comments and discussion happened. And so that was something that I think the public found to be better than I think some of the initial housing element items. So I think that went pretty well. So, a couple of recaps. We had some interesting questions about. I'm done. Okay. We had some interesting comments about vehicle miles traveled, and we had some discussion about why that's a new metric for looking at traffic congestion, if you will. Actually, not congestion, but traffic impacts. There was a question about rideshare services and emerging technologies. Definitely interest there. One question I thought was quite good was how do we reroute those mapping applications out of our neighborhoods? And so we'll look into that one as well. But all of these issues are things that we can discuss. I think the big takeaway is that there really was a desire from comments that I thought were relevant. We're trying to create a proper balance between mobility and traffic and housing and those impacts that might be as a result. So I think it was a really good and robust discussion. We're next slide, please. Moving forward, we've got 2 workshops coming up on December 15th at 6 o'clock. These are virtual workshops. So we're going to take a deeper dive, if you will, into the existing themes of the housing, the circulation element. I think the first night we're going to be talking about mobility, the existing roadway network, regional transportation, public transportation as well. On the second night, on the 16th, again 6 o'clock, we'll be looking at other different themes. Alternative transportation, transportation management systems, parking, and funding of these improvements. And so what we're really doing is trying to set the stage to educate everyone as to what's really in the existing circulation element so that we can then have a debate and discussion about, well, what's relevant moving forward in a new circulation element. And we are going to have some additional workshops in January. And so this is a flyer that's going to be going out to the community. It's going to be posted on social media again. And go ahead, next slide, please. So this was a slide that was in your packet, and I wanted to note a couple of updates there. The dates of what's in your packet are still relevant, except the January sessions. We indicated that we would have a workshop, a visioning workshop on January 13th, but it's actually going to be moved back to January 27th. And then we'll have a Planning Commission working study session on February 14th and not January 21st. So we basically pushed that back a little bit. So that was really kind of my presentation this evening. I wanted to encourage everyone to possibly watch that initial study session item. That it's available at newporttogether.com. And I think after, what you'll notice is the first 44 minutes are similar content to what the presentation you already received. But I think going forward, you now hear the community dialogue that occurred. And I think that's an interesting way to kind of get involved with the circulation element. And we hope to have you maybe participate or listen in on the future study sessions. So if there's any questions, happy to answer them, but that's my report.
Great, thanks, Jim. Yes, I was able to watch the video meeting, and it was about 2 hours, and it was informative. It was important to hear what some of the community was saying. So if commissioners, if you get an opportunity to pull up that site, you can watch the video. And what's interesting is there's a feature that lets you speed ahead a little bit, so you can kind of listen at a faster speed, like that Micro Machines guy, so it gives you an opportunity to watch it in a little less time than 2 hours, so you can catch up a little bit faster, and I was able to take advantage of that. So, but these next meetings, I think on the 15th and 16th, if you get an opportunity just to tap in for a little while, you don't have to comment, you don't have to engage. In fact, I think our attorney probably would advise us that we not engage, but we can listen to what's being said and kind of have a good bearing on what we're looking forward to when this comes to us for the full circle engagement that we're looking forward to. And that will be February 4th. Is that what you show? Or was that just another update for us?
Well, I'm going to be doing a brief update like this on every meeting.
Okay.
On February 4th, we're likely to do a study session where we report out kind of what we've heard over all 3 of the workshops, a little bit more in depth, and then getting some feedback from the commission about, what we heard from the community, where we think how circulation policy should be going, providing, that feedback to the consulting staff and city staff, myself, Mr. Tony Bryan, and Mr. Petros, who are assisting us in preparation of the document. So that will be on February 4th. And one last point on this slide that's on your on the screen right now. We had December 17th as a Planning Commission meeting. Actually, that meeting's been canceled, and I'll report out the schedule going forward in my report later on this evening. But you can scratch December 17th from a meeting
Okay, thanks, Jim. Yeah, again, commissioners, it's important to participate if you can. I found there was some interesting dialogue, especially dealing with the circulation of not just cars, but, people, bicycles, jogging, walking, electric bikes. Like you said, Waze was interesting. I think the discussion didn't really hit it as hard as it will be probably coming up, but how Uber and Lyft will work with that, and widening streets, complete streets, how OCTA and all the different agencies, maybe how Irvine and Costa Mesa play into all of this. So I think it's important that we get an opportunity to pay attention to it coming from us on the Planning Commission. So Commissioner Kedding and other commissioners, if you want to ask any questions.
Thank you, Chair. I was asked by Jim to make a presentation on this, but I think you covered some of it. I'm the liaison from the Planning Commission. People wanted to know where the Planning Commission, liaison was. If you don't mind, I'll run through some notes I took on that. It was a very interesting process. And by the way, the young woman who did the moderating did a fabulous job, in my opinion. I'm just going to touch on some of the items that people called in on, and some of which Jim and Tony responded to. Nancy, I think it was Nancy Gardner, who's coordinating, she's with the Housing Committee, said that there's got to be a detailed coordination. And later you're going to hear from me that says that Tony said that the housing element's got to be laid out, and then the circulation follows in. And then I guess there's a little civil war among the two. Jim Mosier thought that MacArthur Boulevard was way too wide, and what could we do to streets like that don't need to be that big? Probably way too late now. And there was a discussion on what's called complete streets. Everybody should remember that for the quiz later. Big discussion, as the chair said, on these bicycles on sidewalks. And now with the motorized bicycles, the electric ones, it's getting a little bit harder to handle. Tony indicated that you're not allowed to ride a bicycle on a sidewalk in Newport Beach. There were issues brought up 3 times on global warming and how we can work. These are people calling in. How we can locate circulation and housing around basic needs and necessities, such as grocery, drugstore, etc. So people can walk to these places. People, kind of jumped over to housing. How can we push back on the RENA numbers? There was a big discussion on that, even though this was circulation. More comments on the pedestrian. Oh, the West Ocean Front, 36th to E Street. And one thought came out from staff is that there could be a pedestrian walkway and bicycle and trolley thing. So that's something we can think about. That's circulation. Mariner's Mile came up about 3 times. Mobility, roadway system, regional transportation connections, alternative transportation there, parking and transportation funding. One interesting comment came up is that Jim pointed out that for years, it's been a policy in the circulation element that City of Newport look into buying the right-of-way from Dover down through Corona Del Mar from Caltrans, so we can kind of control our own destiny. That I hadn't seen that before, and it's been in the books for a long time. Again, Mariner's Mile, because of kids and crossings, and people don't want the traffic and the noise. That's a circulation element. Ownership, wave maps. Chair mentioned it briefly. There was a big discussion on how, and Tony said he's been in communication with Wave. Instead of steering people through neighborhoods, try to steer them to boulevards or 4-lane, neighborhood roads instead of private streets almost. Golf cart vehicles, that's part of circulation, and apparently we have some elements in there now about neighborhood electric vehicles, which go a little higher speed. You have to have seat belts and license. And that could become a new way to get around the city with less traffic. So those items. A couple people phoned in about how do we coordinate with Irvine and the Costa Mesa on traffic? And has the city ever stopped Irvine and lower some densities when they came into the community? And Tony indicated that's very difficult, but we did get money from the city of Irvine to help improve Jamboree Road at 73 back a number of years ago. So it can happen. But what else here? Oh, Jim, you didn't mention there was a big discussion about the fact this circulation element's got to be completed by October of 2021, submitted to the state. The traffic engineer said, then we will do a EIR on the effects of the circulation element. Now that October 2021 means that the housing element's got to be pretty much done, Jim, is that correct?
Commissioner Ketting, I think the housing element is what we have to complete and submit to the state for review by October of 2021, or at least within 120 days of that, technically. Our intent is to wrap up both elements in a draft form to do an EIR, later in the spring, and then complete that EIR over the summer and have it ready for adoption. So that's sort of the sequence of how the two elements are going to be reviewed and prepared and analyzed going forward. So,
And I'll finish with one that I enjoyed. It was a great question. Had to do with housing, but it kind of links with circulation. This gentleman called in and said, what if the housing element overlays your property and you don't want to have multifamily zoning on yours? You like what you have. What then? And there was no answer for that. Just think about it, that's all. I'm through.
Thank you, Commissioner Ketting. I appreciate your participation in that and some good insight. I took a lot of the same of what you'd said, so I appreciate you engaging. Are there any other commissioners that wanted to ask any questions of staff? Okay, the commission will take public comments on this item. So if you're watching remotely and want to provide comments, the phone number again is 949-270-8165. And I will go to the community room for public comments if there are any. Mr. Mosher?
Yes, Chair Wygand, members of the commission, my name is Jim Mosher. And I too wanted to thank Commissioner Ketting for that report, much more thorough than I had anticipated we would be hearing on this item tonight. I respectfully wanted to offer one clarification having to do with the riding of bicycles on sidewalks in Newport Beach. While the default is that they are prohibited until the city of Newport Beach has complete streets everywhere, there is in fact a list of sidewalks on which bicycle riding is permitted. It includes such things as going across the Back Bay Bridge, where you can use the sidewalk on the two sides. And if you're going by bicycle from Newport Heights down Riverside Drive to the Peninsula area, when you get on the south side of PCH, the driveway there is actually, the sidewalk on the south side of PCH, going by the winery and so forth, is a designated bicycle route. There are others, and there's areas in the city where it'd be very inappropriate to ride on a sidewalk, like in the commercial district of Corona Del Mar. But while the default is prohibition, it's not prohibited everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments in the community room? Seeing none, I will go to the phone lines. There is one caller. Hello, you're on.
Yes, my name is David Tanner, Newport Beach resident. I have a question about the schedule that Mr. Campbell just described. I'd like to get clarification on that. And that is the draft housing element that's going to be submitted to the HCD. is that going to be approved by the city or just a draft document that has no effect? Is it just a working draft? And how will that document be received by HCD? Because it's my understanding that HCD wants a approved housing element, which most likely will require internal consistency with other elements of the general plan, as well as a vote of the public in accordance with the city charter. So I'd like an explanation exactly what the strategy is, because this is a change in strategy from what we've previously been told. Thank you.
Thank you. No other calls? Okay. Jim, do you have an answer for any of that?
Sure. The review of the housing element's going to, by the state, is going to take 2 stages. We actually give them a draft early in the spring and summer for their initial review, and we take their comments and then incorporate it into a final document that we'll be bringing forward to the City Council through the Housing Element Update Committee, as well as the Planning Commission, then to the City Council, with a target of adoption in October of the year. So, and then we will submit that as an approved element to HCD for their official certification review process. We will be coming back and updating the land use element at a later date to be consistent with the housing element, and that will require a vote of the electorate. So there is that will be the ultimate strategy that we're going forward. So housing here in 2021, then we'll immediately start the land use element update to be consistent with the housing element policy. We'll start that and complete that as rapidly as we can after the housing element. So I think that's the clarification Mr. Tanner is seeking.
Great, thank you. All right, and that's, I believe it. Is there any other comments from commissioners at all? Okay. All right, thank you all for your comments. And I will end the discussion on this and go to our public hearing items, which is item number 3, short-term lodging on Newport Island LCP Amendment, PA 2020-326. Site location is Newport Island. Again, if you want to comment on this item, please call 949-270-8165. And staff, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Wiggin. Simone Jurgis, Community Development Director. Got to switch sides over here to the other side of the council chambers. Hard to see all this, the commissioners with the new holiday decorations there, but thank you. Good evening. We're talking about short-term lodging again, and as the commission knows, the council has been spending almost 2 years on short-term lodging. I wanted to give just a brief background, brief history of how we got here. Then I'm going to hand it over to Jaime Murillo, our principal planner. We also have Brian Contino. He's our code enforcement supervisor. He's sitting in the audience to answer any kind of code enforcement related questions. As the commission knows, the council's been working on short-term lodging. They've recently adopted an ordinance that really changed the operation of short-term lodging, and that's ordinance number 15 of this year. Additionally, the council, as the commission reviewed, adopted a cap of $1,550 and a 3-night minimum stay throughout the city, and that item is being sent to the Coastal Commission. What was remaining that the council wanted to address, and this is really based on a lot of the resident complaints from Newport Island, was how to address short-term lodging on Newport Island. And it's a very unique island. It's a very unique tight streets over there. So the council did ask staff to go ahead and initiate some code changes, and that's why we're here, because the council has directed us to do that. You're going to hear some public testimony from the residents of Newport Island, those that do not own short-term lodging units and those that do own short-term lodging units. So let me go ahead and have Jaime Murillo go ahead and make that brief presentation as far as what is this code change for you this evening. And again, this tonight is just really a recommendation to the city council. Whether you approve these changes or you do not, it's just a recommendation to the council, and they'll make that final decision.
Thank you, Simone. Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. As Simone mentioned, at the October 13th City Council meeting, the City Council initiated the amendments before you tonight. And it's pretty straightforward. The amendments would effectively prohibit the issuance of any new permits on Newport Island. And then the second component of that is to phase out any existing permits that currently exist over approximately the next 2 years, unless those permits are transitioned to owner-occupied and owner-managed permits, meaning that if a property owner owns a duplex and they live in one unit and rent out the second unit, and they manage the short-term lodging, they'd be allowed to retain their permit. Or if they own a single-family home and choose to rent out a bedroom or two through the short-term lodging program, they would also be allowed to retain their permit. But the intent is to phase out any existing permits unless they meet that criteria. This slide shows the geography of Newport Island, and it is unique. Although we do have 7 islands in the harbor, most of the islands are zoned for single-family residential use, which means that short-term lodging is prohibited on those islands. And so the exception really is Balboa Island, which allows 2 units per lot, and Newport Island. But as you can see, Newport Island is substantially smaller than Balboa Island. The other thing that makes Newport Island a little unique and different is that although it is zoned for 2-family residential, most of the properties or the lots are developed for single-family use. And that's actually an error on that slide. Instead of 81%, it's actually 68%, but a majority of the lots are developed as single-family. And I think what really brought this to the forefront as an issue on Newport Island is that for a long time there's only 2 short-term lodging permits, but in the last 3 years, the number of permits has exponentially increased. And so we've seen an approximately 500% increase in the number of permits issued in the last 3 years. And I think a lot of the problems that we normally hear associated with short-term lodging has really become more prevalent. And so, these 4 problems that are common with all short-term lodging, you have noise associated with large parties or large families having a good time next door, inappropriate use of their trash containers or excessive trash, and then more importantly is parking and traffic, which I'll show you some slides next. But given the small size of the island and predominantly single-family character, I think a lot of these problems seem to be intensified on the island. In terms of parking, this slide shows kind of the typical cross-section of a street on Newport Island. There's very limited on-street parking, and that's due to the island was originally subdivided back in the early 1900s with very narrow streets. And so with the narrow streets, parking is really single-loaded, so there's only parking on one side of the street. And also because there's only 2 alleys on the island, a lot of the properties actually have to take access off the main streets, which result in a lot of curb cuts. And so that also eliminates a lot of opportunities for parking on the street. And so there's a lot of demand for that on-street parking. A lot of the residents and dwellings are older, so they're non-conforming due to parking standards as well. And so there's a lot of competition for the on-street parking from residents, their guests, now the transient users of the short-term lodging, and also during the off-peak months throughout the year, the island is used for public access. And so the problems occur is when people trying to find parking, there's not enough parking. You can see these are pictures that were provided from a lot of the complaints we received and letters. But you can see vehicles that don't fit on the driveway and then blocking pedestrian access or poking into the street and obstructing circulation through the island. You also see a number of vehicles parked in the red zones, which again constrain the maneuverability through those streets and could have an issue with emergency access as well. And then lastly, as I mentioned, during the non-summer months, the public can park on Newport Island, and there's 9 public access points where the public can access the water, launch a kayak or paddleboard, and there is a public beach and park on the island that's accessible as well. So for those reasons, the City Council initiated this amendment, and that summarizes my presentation. Staff's recommendation is to recommend approval of these amendments and move them forward to the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll ask commissioners if they have any questions for staff. Commissioner Ketting?
I'm curious, these photos are pretty incriminating. Do the police go out and tag them and tow cars, trucks? Do the fire departments, if they have to get out there, just push them aside? What's the ramification of that?
Chair, Commissioner Ketting, so with parking enforcement, we always encourage the residents to call the police department, and they'll send a parking enforcement officer. Parking enforcement isn't everywhere all the time. So I think we've received a number of complaints of some of these parking issues, parking violations. As we encourage them to call the police department, we've recently approved our vendor, AmeriPark, who does our parking enforcement. They've been patrolling Newport Island of recent. Really, it's been maybe within the last month. But before that, it's really the police department's responsibility with regards to parking enforcement. With regards to our fire trucks, our engines, and our life safety response, they're great. They're fabulous. They can get anywhere at any time, and they've been able to maneuver through those tight streets. And I'm sure you probably may hear some, a lag in response times. But when I've talked to the fire chief, they feel they have proper access there. Of course, they would love to have better access, clearly, but it's a built-out community, built-out island, so it's difficult. But they're able to get access to that island.
Thank you.
Commissioner Elmore?
Yeah, question for you. So if somebody parks illegally and is a short-term renter, and then so the neighbor calls, does the operator for that unit, do they get tagged?
So thank you, Commissioner Elmore. So recently, the council did adopt a new ordinance, and there is a provision, and this is very recent, within the last month, there is a new provision that if staff can tie the parking violation, the parking citation, to a short-term lodging unit, then that unit would get a citation for a violation of the municipal code. Our new code for short-term lodging now requires the operator to actually collect the license plate numbers of those tenants that are visiting those short-term lodging units. It will be staff's responsibility, city staff, to tie the vehicle to the unit, and we'd have to communicate with the operator, get the registration numbers for that specific unit, and then we can tie the information of the parking citation that's related to that unit. They would get if the violation has to occur within 100 feet of the property line, and then that unit can get a citation.
And has code enforcement been successful in any of these, tagging these and applying them towards an operator?
This is a relatively new provision in the ordinance, and now we got into our slower season, so we don't. I'm going to look over to Mr. Contino. Let him come out here and address it.
Good evening. As Simone said, my name is Brian. I'm with the Code Enforcement Division, and we have actually been able to issue a couple citations for parking violations, but it's, once again, as Simone was saying, this is our slower time, so that has kind of come down, and the complaints have not been as frequent as they are during our summer months.
Can you just real quick walk me through, and maybe everybody, through the order of magnitude about citations? How many citations an operator can have until they lose their license?
So with our new policy, it's 2 citations, and then it gets sent for suspension, where they have to go through an administrative hearing process. After the 3rd citation, if they go on suspension, it's a 6-month suspension. After they come off that, if they receive another citation, then they will be revoked. So it's a total of 3 citations.
And to date, I know Simone says this is very new. Has anybody been suspended to date?
Not that I know of, no.
So nobody has received 2 citations?
No, not since the new policy went into effect.
Okay. And how the policy's been in effect for 60 days, 30 days?
Since mid-August.
Mid-August.
Correct.
Okay. So relatively new. And the high time, I assume, is the summer for
That is correct, yes.
for this? Okay. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Commissioner Klostermeyer?
Question for you. Are citations only applicable to parking, or can they be for noise after
So
hours?
we can issue citations. We do issue citations for noise, trash can violations, parking is one of them, or just disturbance of the peace that's been identified by the police department itself.
Okay, and then there was a graphic that was shown earlier of the 18 short-term lodging permits on the island. Are you seeing a higher frequency of certain properties receiving complaints and citations?
We do have a couple properties that receive a bulk of our complaints.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kleiman.
Yeah, actually, that was mostly my question, but just to get further clarification, my specific question was going to be to staff. Obviously, you've spent so much time on this, and I just am trying to understand if we've really studied the correlation, as Commissioner Klostermeyer just touched on, between the calls for service or the calls for enforcement and specific properties. In other words, have we specifically tied these complaints to just short-term rentals, or is this just a blanket problem on the island, whether it's a long-term renter, short-term renter, a homeowner, if they're just having parking issues or noise issues, how many of those can we really point to as being associated with just short-term rentals?
Thank you, Commissioner Kleiman. For Newport Island, we've received a number of complaints all through the summer season. I think the hardest part for code enforcement is documentation and evidence. You can't just go by a complaint. The code enforcement officer has to witness the violation, and I think that has been kind of the struggle with on the enforcement side, is because we are not able to always witness the actual violation occurring. You do see the photos of the parking violations, so we have documentations for that. And I'll ask Brian to come up to the lectern again. And what's the number of citations issued for Newport Island just in this year alone?
For just short-term lodging, we've issued 4 citations on Newport Island related to short-term lodging. For every violation, I don't know the exact number total, including the long-term tenants.
So more of a robust study, Commissioner Kleiman. We don't have that nexus. We haven't developed that nexus. So again, this is really council driven as far as this ordinance change.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rosine.
Thank you. So the one thing that really caught my attention as I reviewed this was that a short-term rental permit can be issued to a home that is non-conforming in their parking. And I thought that was interesting, and I was wondering if that's ever been explored as to whether or not that should be something that is a condition to a permit being issued at all.
Thank you, Commissioner Rosine. That has been studied and addressed with the council subcommittee, is how do we address parking? And there's a number of units in Newport Beach that do not have adequate parking or adequate garage. When we went back and tried to estimate how many nonconformities there would be, we're looking up into close to 400 units would be nonconforming. The council subcommittee didn't want to take that permit away from those short-term lodging units. I mean, they felt that was going to be much more problematic. So at this point, when they made their recommendations, the recommendation was to at least require the homeowner to at least declare if they have a parking and where is it? Is it just the driveway? Is it the street? Or is it the garage? Parking is a coastal issue also. So even if they required to have one parking space on site, it still have to go through the Coastal Commission. So the ad hoc committee made a determination not to require a parking space, just to leave it as is.
So sort of a follow-up question to that is, when we're talking about occupancy in a particular unit, is parking considered as a part of the occupancy that's allowed, or is it strictly bedroom count?
It's strictly floor area, it's gross square footage. That's the requirement. And as a reminder just to the commission, the council and the council subcommittee has done enormous amounts of work. And you just have to imagine before August, there was really no codes to address the operation of short-term lodging. The only thing there was just trash and noise. That's it. There's absolutely nothing else. There's no code enforcement citation, no code enforcement data to support anything because there's no codes to violate. So the newest regulations, ordinance number 15 that went into effect in mid-August, is light years in the making, and it's substantial. So we just have to understand that there was never really any strong code provisions for short-term lodging, and now we've developed the code provisions, and now we're just starting to do that enforcement going forward.
Any other commissioners with questions? Commissioner Klostermeyer.
Yeah, how long have short-term lodging permits been issued in the city?
No, since 1992.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Klostermeyer, I believe historically short-term lodging has been part of the Newport Beach culture. It's been around for a very long time. But the actual permit program started in '92.
I just had one question as far as parking permits go, not applications or permits for short-term housing or lodging, but parking. Isn't there a parking permit that you have to be on that island, or did that come and go over time?
I'll call a friend on that one.
Yeah, I thought Newport Island and maybe by Newport Harbor there was a parking pass that you had to specifically have a sticker to park there. And
You're correct. Yeah, it's one of the few areas in the city where we have a preferential parking permit. And so each property gets 3 permits, and the permit is valid from May to September. So if you don't have a permit, you're not allowed to park on the streets during that time.
Gotcha. So then, as you were saying, our staff member on the code enforcement, sorry, I forgot your name. My apologies. But if you're there in the off season, any member can come, or anyone can come down and use those access points. So that's kind of the off season usage that we were was kind of hinting about. So, okay. All right. There is a ex parte question on this, even though it's a staff driven item. So I just looked to anyone to see if they've had ex parte communications.
None.
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 Aside from the letters, we've received none on my end. Okay, I will open the public hearing. The commission will take public comments on this item. If you're watching remotely, again, please call 949-270-8165 and please mute your TV. First, I'll go to the community room for public comments.
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Lori Bowman. My family and I oppose the recommendation that would only allow owner-occupied parcels on Newport Island for the existing short-term lodging permits. We currently own a home on Newport Island. It has been in the family for over 80 years. We share the home for get-togethers, reunions, and vacations with relatives and friends. We also rent the house throughout the year on a short-term basis, and we rely on the rental income to help with the cost of home maintenance, repair, and other expenses. We are responsible renters. We do not rent to parties who cause disturbances or damage property. We follow all the city rules related to short-term lodging, and we renew our license and permit on a timely basis. Our property does not fall under the owner-occupied category, and it would cause financial hardship to maintain our property if we're unable to generate short-term rental income. We're aware of the ongoing problems with short-term tenants who are disruptive, disrespectful, and who damage property. We completely understand and support the need to establish and enforce rules and policies to penalize property owners on the island who do rent to the bad seeds. However, we do believe that as responsible property owners, we should not be penalized because of those owners who do not follow the rules and who rent their homes out in an irresponsible manner. Those who are in favor of the owner-occupied recommendation cite Newport Island as a unique residential community with unique challenges such as parking problems, density of homes, narrow streets, and so on. But these are the same problems that all the other areas in Newport Beach have experienced with short-term rentals. The problems with short-term lodging are just not unique to Newport Island. So why should Newport Island homeowners, who are responsible short-term rental operators, be penalized when other homeowners in Newport Beach are permitted to rent non-owner-occupied properties on a short-term basis? It's unfair and inequitable to single out Newport Island. As longtime property owners of Newport Island, we're proud to be part of this community, and we just ask to be treated fairly and equitably. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Chair Wigand, members of the commission, my name again is Jim Mosier. I do not live on Newport Island. I, in fact, live in an R1 area along the Back Bay. I feel the pain of my friends who live on Newport Island. I think if I lived in an R2 area, I would be a little bummed out that the city allows short-term lodgings in my area while prohibiting them in the R1 areas, especially since our coastal land use plan says that we offer single-family homes to visitors on a short-term basis. The main comment I want to make about this, the ordinance itself seems straightforward. It does what it says. But I, too, am wondering a little bit about why it's being applied and offered only to Newport Island. I would like to draw your attention to page 93 of the agenda packet, which I think was one of the slides. It's the diagram showing the houses that are single-family duplexes and the ones that have short-term lodgings in them. It does not show the condition of areas around there, so I would like to call your attention to the area immediately across the Rialto Canal, which is called the Finley Tract, which is actually part of the identical subdivision. And although it doesn't have the graphs and the dots on it, it's in the lower right of the slide that's up there now. It looks like it's about half single family, half duplexes, slightly lower percentage of single family than Newport Island. I looked at the short-term lodging map, and it has, if you put the dots on it, it has about the same density. So I'm wondering if that area too has had an explosion of short-term lodging and had similar impacts, and if so, why this new relief would not be granted to those residents as well as the ones on Newport Island. Is it only because they're not as well organized? If so, I think we should be looking if there's other areas that would be similarly impacted. And then, although it's not a comment on the ordinance, I do have a comment on the resolution, which I found a little bit misleading from what you've heard about the parking impact. This is page 15. Finding 6 in the resolution is saying that the on-street parking is also used by visitors seeking public access to the water via the 9 street ends and a public park. It implies that the short-term lodgings are impacting visitors trying to find parking on the island, but as we've heard, visitors are not allowed to park there during the summer. So I think this should be revised to mention that that's only, as Jaime said, during the non-summer hours that the visitors would be seeking public access. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers in the community room, I'll go to, oh, sorry, there is one more coming up. My apologies.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Gary Cruz. I live on Newport Island. I did a little work this morning looking at the Planning Commission's website, and I saw all the letters that are in the packet there, and there's a lot missing. I don't know if some of them just didn't make it or what the case may be, but I know I wrote a letter and it wasn't in there. But regardless, I get to make my point tonight. I read a lot of the letters, and especially some of the ones from the opponents to the short-term housing were very well written, and no, not all the short-term rentals are bad. In fact, most of them are good. But the ones that are bad, including some that wrote letters, are really bad. And if you live next door to one, you would know what I mean. For instance, if any of you on this commission live in a R1 area, what would it be like for you if all of a sudden short-term rentals were coming into your neighborhood? That's kind of how we feel. I know I've been there a long time, but many of the residents came in here recently and they bought on Newport Island specifically to be away from the partying. I was talking to one couple that just bought their house a few years ago, and they were all in favor of the putting more restrictions on them. Sadly, there's a for sale sign on their house right now. So they've altered their lifestyle. They've moved. They're in the process of moving because the neighborhood isn't what they thought. Quite frankly, at $1,000 a night, if changes aren't made, at $1,000 a night, I'd be a fool not to get a short-term rental permit. And I think that's what the tipping point is that we're worried about. All these short-term rentals, if nothing happens with it, then there'll just be more and more short-term rentals, and pretty soon we'll have a vacation getaway and not a residential neighborhood. We are still a residential neighborhood, and we all like living there as a residents, but that could change if something isn't done. Thank you. Oh, one more thing with regards to the parking. I think many of us realize the biggest culprits in the parking is not necessarily the short-term rentals. It's probably the construction. And any given day, we've got construction trucks parked in the red, parked in the middle of the street, parked all over the place. You know, we've spoken to, isn't there any way we can control the construction around here? And I've been told, and I believe it's true, that the answer is no. So if we can't do something with that, we as residents on Newport Island are trying to do whatever we can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And as far as the letters go, we do receive them, but the cutoff is Friday before the agenda comes out. So our agenda packets come out on Friday. And so if you've submitted a letter prior to that Friday, we'll get them in our packet. But if they are submitted after, they get to us via email. So we do receive them, just not in our agenda packet. Yes, sir.
So my name is Charles Gayton. I live at 3711 Channel, and I made the front page. That's very exciting. So short-term rentals, parking, we're the only ones who park illegally, right? And no one else? Long-term renters don't park illegally? Yeah, they do. And I've got some people here that I know, and I've seen that they have. And do I call the police on a neighbor of mine because he's loading, unloading, trying to find something? No. But do they call on us? Yes, of course. I'm one of those persons who did get a citation. It cost me $1,000. And I have signs posted, do not park there. My downstairs renter, I have an arrangement with him where he calls me and tells me if there's a problem to take care of it. We are very, very concerned about this. And to be honest with you, I have a duplex, upstairs, downstairs. I've had more problems with long-term people where I've had to evict, remodel after them and everything else. I've been doing this now on and off for 30 years at Newport Beach. Originally, the real estate people who would take care of it had a week minimum. I think if you guys would please get off the idea that Newport Beach is special. Newport Island. Yeah, it is special. But you know what? Balboa has the same problems, the same amount of density of these short-term rentals. Come up with something that works for everybody. Don't just penalize us. I went along to get along on phase one. They get 3 nights, we get 4. I mean, we've done it. I'm tired of it. Either treat us all equally or find some real reasons. I want to see some police reports. What's really going on? The gentleman before me mentioned Finley. I hear more noise coming over the water from Finley than I do next door to me, which is a full-time rental. So, you know, I just ask, I feel 19 of us, like we are the biggest problem Newport Beach has ever had, and we all know that this is a problem that needs to be fixed throughout Newport Beach. And the idea that you just keep going after 19 of us, you know, I was irritated, and I got to tell you, I'm getting angry about this. It's just no fair person, knowing all the issues with parking and everything else, can say that Newport Beach has a bigger problem than any other place. And someone's going to come up here and talk about the quality of life. Well, you know what has ruined the quality of life on Newport Beach? These people have only been there for 1 or 2 years. They built a 3-story place. They bring their big SUVs. They have ruined the quiet Newport Beach. So don't tell me that short-term rental people are the one that's affecting Newport Island. I'm sorry, but this has just got to stop. And if we have to, I will match funds up to $50,000 if we have to take this to court. Quit picking on Newport Island. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mike Ivey. I live at 3801 Marcus. Been there for a couple of years. We do rent the home, and I am in favor of short-term rentals. I'm going to face the committee right here at this camera because I like to talk right to people. I think the biggest problem is that you see a picture that's up there and immediately assume that all those cars that are parked illegally are short-term rental people. But they're not. The residences are the biggest issue. I could drive right now down to the island, and I could show you 4 cars that are parked illegally. And right now, short-term rentals that are at an all-time low. Parking is always a problem. It always will be a problem on the island. I think you're going to find that the residents just feel that they're more entitled. So they will park where they please, thinking that they're above everybody else. Illegal parking is illegal parking. That's all there is to it. It's simple. So if someone wants to call on a short-term rental saying that their car is parked illegally and that short-term rental person is going to get a fine for $1,000, we should have the same right to call on the resident and go, their car is also parked illegally, and they should also receive the same fine. The way I look at it, we just want to be treated equal. If you want to impose all of these fines and issuances on us, that's fine. Go ahead. We're just going to push right back, and it's going to come right back to the people who are there. You know who I'm talking to. So if you really want to stand up for what you believe in, be prepared to have those same fines and penalties come back to you. On the noise issue, it's kind of fun. My daughter had a party. We were playing a bunch of music during the first round of the COVID, and we blasted music off the patio, having a grand old time. People coming out, dancing on the patio. I guess we're the residences, so we can get away with it. But if we had a renter in there, within seconds, there would be a complaint, and so all of a sudden, they're being treated differently than everybody else. And that's the problem. We just want to be treated equal. That's it. The same rules should apply to us that apply to every other area in Newport Beach. There is no difference. So all we're asking for is equality in the entire issuance of permits, how those permits are handled, and make sure that the renters on Newport Island are treated like all the other renters in Newport Beach. There are a lot of us that are very responsible, and we have never had a complaint in our rental area. Matter of fact, a lot of the residents has come up and tell us, oh, your renters are so great. Okay, well, then why are we being penalized? This is what I don't understand. It's, whoa, you're good, someone else isn't. All right, well, you can weed out some of the bad ones. We're okay with that. But the reality is there's so many of us that are good, but we're being penalized through all of these rules and regulations that are now being applied to us. So all we're asking for is fairness. That's all there is to it. If this goes any further, it's going to get nasty. It's already started to get nasty. Unfortunately, there's friends that are becoming unfriendly on the island right now. I'm one of them that's feeling it. So I appreciate your time. Just treat us fairly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mark Marcos, Newport Island. I'm a long-term resident, and I do appreciate the good operators on the island. Unfortunately, we have a lot of really, really bad operators that are causing a lot of problems. And yes, there might be some parking issues with long-term residents, but when a short-term resident or owner brings in 10, 12 people with 4 to 6 cars, that changes the dynamics of things. And some of my friends here, they're not on the island all the time, so they don't quite see all the problems that we're facing. And they do exist. And are there violations being made? Well, maybe not, because they have to be witnessed. And the thing is that there's a ton of violations being witnessed. And you see some of the pictures. I mean, the pictures that were sent in of the vomit in front of the short-term rental house on the party, what was like a week ago, and the access to the end of the island 2 times, where both short-term rental houses block the end of the island for the residents as well as the emergency vehicles. There hasn't been a problem yet, but there definitely will be a problem, and it will be a major problem when an emergency vehicle cannot access an elderly member of our island. So I have to say that in the last 2 years, there has been many, many changes. And what changed? An influx of short-term rental permits. So there is a correlation there. It does exist. If Charles isn't there all the time, he doesn't see what's going on. So the thing is that these problems do exist. They are big problems. There is more noise. There is more congestion. There is more safety issues. There is more parking issues. We have 50 parking spots on the island. So when a short-term rental show up and they bring in 4, 5, 6 cars, there's no room for anybody. So these are big problems. Charles, I'm talking. Thanks. And so I just want, we really hope that you will help us get the change to get our island safe and get the quality of life back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott McFetters, I live on Newport Island, and I think the one thing that really needs to be brought to the attention, which has been brought to the attention, is it's called quality of life. And it has changed, and Mark's completely correct that 3 years ago there was 2 or 3 permitted residents that were doing short-term rentals, and they weren't full-time short-term rentals, they were part-time short-term rentals. Now we've got some new companies that have come in. There's been certain companies that have been in Newport Beach for a long time, as everybody says. But now we have the ones that have got all their investment money, and they're coming into places that have not had short-term rentals before, or where the other people didn't feel comfortable putting them at. So unfortunately for us, we're getting them. So we have it. There are parking issues. Big time. And yeah, I mean, what do you want us to do when somebody parks in a fire zone and blocks a street? We call the police. And we do have a lot of situations, in particular with a few of the operators, that they rent it out for social events, company events. And we had just 3 weeks ago, or I think it was 3 weeks ago, somebody was complaining, one of them, that there wasn't enough spaces for their 6 or 7 cars because people were coming. We've had people come in that stay for a night, then somebody else comes in. And then, it just keeps, it's transient. And if somebody actually did a study on the island, which nobody has, you'd probably find the average on max is probably 3 or 4 people per place. And even some of those duplexes that are listed as duplexes, they're still lived in a single family. So that percentage is even higher. So it's disruptive, and nobody handles it. All the people you're hearing talking about it, they don't live there permanently. They're not staying up at night. They're not getting woken up or get disrupted during the day. And it's Groundhog Day. Every day is a new day. You don't know who's coming in, and you don't know what you're dealing with. And nobody's there. Maybe some of them are meeting them individually and going through the rules and regulations, but most of them they're not. They're relying on their operators. And these operators aren't responsive, and it's ongoing, and it doesn't change. If everybody cared that much, it would have changed by now, and we wouldn't have all these problems. But this has been going on for a long time, and unless you make it owner-occupied or just get rid of them, period, and ban them, then it's not going away, and it doesn't work. It's just disruptive, and there's no way it fixes. It's like putting a round circle in a square box. It doesn't work, and so it's not working, and I don't see it working the way it's going. Thank you.
Thank you. Please refrain from comments for now in the community room. Okay, seeing that there's no other speakers, is there, oh, looks like one more. Please be respectful.
Good evening. My name's Gina and I live on Newport Island as well. I'd just like to say that I think tension does run high. I've seen it tonight. I've experienced it in previous meetings. And I think that's fundamentally come because the expansion of 500% almost of permits has caused it. I don't think it's the individuals. I think it's the lack of oversight and the fact that now the city is asking the residents to become police people. I didn't sign up for that when I came to live there 15 years ago. I don't want to do it. I want to live in harmony with my neighbours. I'd like the same right as somebody who's fighting to keep their income from having their house. I would just like that same right to have a peaceful night's sleep and that, so that I can get up in the morning and do my job well and earn my income. That's all I'm asking for. I don't want to police anybody. I actually agree with some of the residents here. I'd love to see more strict rules put on for parking, for everything like that, whether it be for construction, residents, anybody. But I think these problems have come really from this city's lack of foresight of what are going to be the repercussions. The area across from Newport Island is known as the war zone. It isn't anything to be proud of. I brought family to town one year because I wanted to share Newport Beach. Not like people at Seabreeze would like you to believe that I don't want to share it. I do. I walked along in the party zone with my teenage nieces who were offered drugs. The parents were there. I don't want that to happen where I live so that I can't invite my family and share my residents with them. I'm accused of being a torchbearer by some people in the letters because I want to stand up for my rights. I have rights. It's not to make an income from my property, but I do have some rights. I don't want to be at war with the people I live around. That isn't my intent. And that has come not from any of my doing, but from the city's lack of legislation, lack of dealing with citations. It's not a job for the police. It really isn't. We should never have given it to them. And it's not a job for the neighbour to turn on neighbour. You should never have given that to us either. If I'd chosen to live in a hotel car park, I would have tried to go and live in a hotel car park. But I chose Newport Island for a reason. I want to live there, and I want to live there peacefully with all my neighbours, whether they're coming for short term, long term, or full term. And that is all I ask. Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I good? All right. Hi, my name is Mason Yee. I live at 402 38th Street, or I did, at least until COVID hit. My story is a little bit different from everyone else. You know, my family, we've lived on Newport Island for about 5 years, and I love it. My kids play with the other kids. You know, I've gotten to know my neighbors, and quite frankly, it's where I want to grow old. It's where I want to retire. And it's where I want my kids to be after I pass. It is a special place, and I've always maintained it that way. I've always thought of it that way, and that's why we chose this island. It was difficult for us to short-term it out, but you know, at this time with COVID, we had no choice. However, you know, we thought it was the most important thing to do was to preserve this island. Like a lot of the other short-term landlords, as we'll call them, who also see this place as a community. You know, my next-door neighbor is Barry Mycorn, who also was kind enough to send a letter in on my behalf. He's my godfather, and he was there since you know, I was as young as my kid is now. And he hasn't had a problem with anyone that I brought in because I've always maintained that we have to preserve this island. We have to preserve this community, regardless of if we're full-term or short-term or long-term, landlord or renter. I just don't think a blanket ban on short-term rentals is the right answer. Now, I do want to be clear, I am vehemently against the poor behavior of some of these short-termers that do come to the island. Like the vomit, that's unacceptable, right? Some of the parking, that's unacceptable. That I do believe in. So I feel like there's some sort of a solution, some sort of compromise that the city and the short-termers and the full-timers can, find where everyone can be happy to some degree. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other speakers in the community room? Okay, I'll go to the phones. Remember to please mute your television. Okay, you're on.
Am I on?
Yes, sir.
Well, but very easily, I live on Newport Island. I've lived there since 1995. My wife used to live in the war zone, and my wife and I lived on 36th Street. Her parents had bought there in 1940, and 3 generations have lived on 36th Street. We got tired of the chaos and the drunks that slept behind your garage, and we found Newport Island. We love it. We built here a single-family home in 1995. But since then, we've seen a massive increase in short-term rentals. We thought we had escaped West Newport, but apparently not. The tragedy is the loss of privacy, our peaceful enjoyment, and the feeling of community. And now we have outsiders who consider this a fun zone. And as other speakers have said, we are impacted by the Finley Tract as well. In 1992, the city intervened to regulate short-term rentals. One of their concerns was the commercial use in a residential zone. Apparently, this concern caused the council to exempt most R1 properties, except those grandfathered in 1992. STL's short-term rentals will eliminate long-term rental housing availability. This is now an even more pertinent matter as the state is pressing cities to add more housing inventory. The potential adverse effects are excessive noise, late hours, parking, trash, and all the things you've heard about today. I happen to be looking at a project that was developed in 2000. It was called a Planning Vision for the Balboa Peninsula. The statements made on page 10 says, with respect to the Balboa Peninsula, Newport Beach has generally adhered to a laissez-faire or complaint-based policy based on the theory that at the end of the day, market and economic forces produce the desired result. That's not true. Help us out here. You guys are the planners. Your function is to take care of visitors and residents and owners.
Thank you so much.
Do it now, please. We've been about this now for months, and now you can help us make this a non-issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller, please. Okay, you're on.
Hi, my name is John DiGiovanni. I'm a business owner from Newport Beach for almost 30 years. But tonight I'm speaking as a homeowner on Newport Island. Specifically, I'm here to speak against the Newport Island short-term lodging LCP amendment. I understand this amendment was created in response to the concerns of my neighbors in the Newport Island community. Apparently, certain landlords are not being responsible, not regulating or controlling their tenants, and permanent residents are increasingly upset. If these offenses are true, action must be taken to remedy this. We all bought our properties knowing that short-term rentals are part of the fabric of Newport Island. If landlords don't responsibly control their renters on the island, this is certainly not right, and there has to be repercussions. If we look at the main issues, parking, noise, etc., the proposed amendment will do nothing to alleviate the parking problem, but ironically, it may actually exacerbate it. Let me explain why. If homeowners are now living with renters, that's going to mean more cars and less parking. If renters have to continue to rent for 4 nights instead of 3 nights, that means more occupancy. I personally have had my permit for several years. Our house is vacant for many months of the year when there's no cars at all. Regarding noise, we personally want to be good neighbors, and if we have unruly tenants, we want them warned and or kicked out. If there's a problem, I know there's a 24-hour city hotline. Our management company, via the nuisance report, has a 24-hour where they will come if there's a problem and kick people out. And I have personally given my phone number to my neighbors and let them know if there's an issue, call me personally. I want to know if there's a problem and I would address it. Reasonable solutions might include that there's rules already in place, that if they were implemented would work. We just need to enforce them. The police should be called to enforce the noise, parking, etc., and violations should be issued. Multiple offenders of short-term rental permits are to be suspended and not removed. Might I propose that our parking permits that we have during the summer, if parking is such an issue, maybe we should have those year-round, just a thought. But in final consideration, I do propose the following questions. Is there a formal record maintained that can be shown to the public documenting short-term renters on Newport Island causing excessive noise and or the incidence of parking violations? Of the 18 short-term permits, if there are so many complaints, have any of the short-term rental permits been suspended or revoked? My understanding is there has never been a suspension or revocation of a short-term rental permit. Wouldn't this be a fair and less drastic solution to punish the person not following the rules? In closing, there are already effective laws in place that effectively address the noise and parking violations concerns rooted in this amendment. This amendment is not a solution to the real problems that exist, but rather a blanket punishment to all of us who responsibly and considerably run our rental units and follow regulations. Also, to the vacationers who support the local merchants and restaurants and ultimately revenue to our city. So I truly implore you not to recommend. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Next caller, please. Okay, you're on.
Yes, my name is Peter Burkhardt. I'm a homeowner on Newport Island. And I just wanted to say, first of all, it was well said by the lady with the black hat. She said a lot of things I wanted to say. Renting, as far as I could say, has never been a part of the fabric of Newport Island. When we came here, there was very little of the, shall we say, short-term rentals. And in the last couple of years, the parking issues have just escalated beyond belief. We've had so many calls to the police department to move cars from out in front of our driveway, just blocking it. These are all short-term renters coming into town who don't care about where they're parking, even if they have 4 parking spots behind their house. They will take it and use it. So I am in favor of this ordinance going through. This has always been and is a residential area, and it should not be on the homeowners, nor should it be on the police to enforce this. It should be on the Planning Commission to enforce a new ordinance to ensure that we don't have to be the police of the area and just be able to enjoy our neighborhood. So with that, I would really hope that you would pass this ordinance and take it under consideration. And that's all I really have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. No more callers? Okay. All right. And I'll ask staff to have any comments into response since you are the applicant. Any response to the... None? Okay. All right, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Commissioners, you want me to tee something up? Staff, I guess I could ask a question. Looking into the process of allowing renewals for non-owners occupied. So was that something that was entertained in these discussions coming out of council or in your internal discussions? So instead of making it so an owner has to live there in order to continue their permit, allow just keeping the 18 that exist and just not add any more, and not regulate as far as if somebody lives there, if they live off-site, if they live there temporarily, that it's kind of a broad ownership of the property, but the 18 can exist in perpetuity versus making it so that they have to conform to actually over the next year or two based on coastal approving, coming to living on site and then renting out the property by managing on site. So I'm not sure if staff or council had ever entertained just keeping a moratorium on the 18. And as I say the word moratorium, I guess currently COVID prevents anyone from getting any new applications. So if we make an action tonight that seems like council's going to make a change and then goes through coastal, even if somebody wanted to say, oh, I need to pull a permit last minute, there's a moratorium that the council has approved on dealing with COVID right now that prevents anyone from going out. So the 18 is going to be the 18 that stays probably regardless because of the moratorium that exists. So I'm not sure. I've kind of thrown a lot out there for you guys to answer, but I guess mostly my concern is, have we looked at just keeping this 18 in perpetuity and allowing those who don't live on site to continue to not live on site, but allow them to continue on with the short-term renting?
Thank you, Chair Wagan. I'm going to try to address some of those your comments. You're right. There is a current emergency ordinance or a moratorium throughout the entire city. So due to COVID, the council has decided, really based on a unanimous decision, that no further permits can be issued. And that's just really under our current emergency ordinance. With the cap, and that cap is going to be reviewed by the Coastal Commission, there'll be a maximum number of permits issued of 1,550. But currently right now, due to COVID, there is no new permits issued anywhere in Newport Beach and including the island. With regards to the owner occupancy, if this is approved by the if it's approved by the council, it'll go to the Coastal Commission, and if they approve it, it'll be a 1-year transition to that owner occupancy provision. So property owners would have 1 year to change their model to either live on site or not to live on site, frankly. There was a council majority to support that, and I'm not going to say it was unanimous from the council, but they did deliberate about this owner occupancy provision. The majority of the council wanted to implement an owner occupancy so somebody's on site could actually manage the unit, manage if there's any parties, manage the loud noise, manage any of these parking issues. As you've seen from the photos from Jaime Murillo, you could see that there are tight streets, there are parking issues out there. So the council deliberated over that particular subject matter. They felt that having an owner occupancy would help alleviate, put more controls on some of those kind of impacts that you saw on those photos. With regards to just leaving it as is, there was a deliberation of just no new further permits. So hopefully I answered your question, Chair Wiggin.
Sure. And then as comparing Newport Island, as you said, with parking constraints to other areas of the city, there's not many alleyways on this island versus, say, Balboa Island, where every street has an alleyway that you can get into their parking garages with. It's a little different. It's kind of an apples-oranges comparison between Newport Island and any other place in the city other than maybe, as Mr. Mosier and a couple others alluded to, the Finley track. But for the most part, the city's short-term lodging areas are a little bit more open and wide for parking and more accessibility.
Right.
So I thought that was something I noticed, but I'm happy to have other commissioners weigh in. Yes, Commissioner Kleiman.
Can staff just kind of walk us through the verification of owner occupancy if this were to be approved at all the various levels and go into effect? And then also, once again, coming back to enforcement of that, obviously there's the time and verification, but then how does the city maintain that that's what's continuing to occur on the property?
I'll try to address that question, Commissioner Kleiman. Clearly it's a challenge. So with the owner occupancy, what we have developed is really during the initial permitting process. So remember that these are permits, and so they get renewed every year, and there will have to be a new application. So these permits for these units, they'll have to be really a declaration from the property owner that they're living on site, so that initial permitting during the renewal will be captured. Code enforcement is not going to go out there and do a proactive check to make sure there is truly an owner occupancy. We're not set up that way. It's really a reactive program. In somewhat, you could look at it as more of the honor system. If we get a complaint that there is no owner on site, we will go down there and verify, is the owner on site or not? We do have code enforcement staff. That's what they do. They'll knock on the door, and we'll just repeatedly knock on the door just to verify if there's an owner on site. Again, it is a reactive program. We don't have the staff for a proactive program, which we're actually going out and knocking on all the doors and trying to verify. And like anything, we'll need to have the evidence, and that evidence is really the visual from the code enforcement officer. Is the owner on site? Is the owner living on site? Brian Contino has been through a number of administrative hearings with an administrative hearing officer, and they have a high bar to make sure that we have the proper evidence, that we've talked to the right people, and we've documented everything. So that's going to be really our process to verify that that owner occupancy is occurring.
Okay, thank you. I don't know about the rest of the commission, but I mean, obviously, reading the council minutes, as Mr. George just described as well, they did deliberate about this, and obviously this has been ongoing for quite some time. It's not an easy debate, and it's one of the things since I've been on the commission, I think, that we've received the most comments from, and they're very divided. I've been trying to kind of keep tally from the emails that we received as well as public comment this evening, and it's pretty well divided down the middle. Our job on Planning Commission is to support the will of council. However, it sounded like from the minutes and looking at the votes as well that there was majority support for a prohibition on any new permits, which seems to be pretty consistent, not just for Newport Island, but for the city overall, and maybe slightly less support or less of a majority for the transition to an owner-occupied requirement. Where I begin to struggle is I certainly empathize with the emails that we received and all these photos, all of the public comments that we have heard this evening, living amongst some of the behaviors that are shown in these photos and being described, and particularly what we heard from the one woman about being forced to enforce these rules and just wanting to be, neighborly and going about your own business. And that is not a position that I would want to be in. However, I guess I would say I would support a limitation on one's property rights if I thought that it would in fact alleviate the issues that are being described. And I'm just not there. I genuinely do not believe that changing over, and requiring the unit to be owner occupied or any additional restriction is going to solve these problems. It sounds like parking is and is going to continue to be an ongoing problem, as is the access for emergency vehicles due to, as one gentleman mentioned, the construction, which we hear throughout the entire city as being an ongoing problem. So that's about where I sit at this moment.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Elmore.
So, as I think back about our duties, we are a land use and planning body. We focus in on just that, planning. I break this down into a couple different buckets. First off is rights for a property. I think from a property perspective, if you own a house, you have the ability to rent out that house, whether it's short-term, whether it's long-term, it's your house, it's your decision to make. Now, if you're going to be a bad operator, that begs into another question. Bad operator is somebody that is clearly, what we're seeing here is being identified as not being conscious of their neighbors. There's an ordinance 15 that was put in place in August to do just this, is to smoke out bad operators. And I think the cart needs to be put in front of the horse. I think ordinance 15 needs to have the opportunity to have a track record, to work, to smoke out the bad operators, to pull their permits, and to allow that to go into effect. I don't necessarily agree with just picking a piece of the city and plopping down a blanket. We're just going to take your rights away from you for the lodging permits. From a parking perspective, whether they're short-term or whether long-term renters, this island's always going to have a parking problem, especially with the construction. It's just going to always have a parking problem, so it's not going to change it. I appreciate all the photos, but photos of cars parked can be from anybody. Long-term renters, residents can have parties and be bad neighbors. My position on this is I don't necessarily agree with this. I think we should turn this down and allow ordinance 15 to do what it was set out to do.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask staff, perhaps, Commissioner Elmore brought up property rights, so, if we could just clarify, what the meaning of that is and how it kind of impacts this particular decision we're making up. If the council has already kind of had a discussion about this, surely somebody would have said that we're violating property rights, but I'm not sure if that discussion came up.
Thank you, Chair Wigand, Yolanda Summerhill with the City Attorney's Office. Certainly, I know that property rights are a very important right, and particularly here in Newport Beach, it's a reoccurring concern. I would point out that adopting an ordinance that limits the short-term lodging permits, a property owner would still be entitled to economic benefits as a result. They could live on the property, they could rent and or even sell. So it would not deprive the property owner of economic value of their property. So I think that there is reasonable justification based on the concerns. And if you have any other questions, let me know.
Commissioner Lowry, thank you.
That's kind of the road I was going down, and Yolanda just, it almost seems to me in a way that at least in this one case, you're almost kind of downzoning from an R2 to R1, at least in terms of maybe this little bundle of right, if you will, in terms of being able to have a short-term lodging. And it just, taking is a very big word, but it just seems like it's somewhat of a limitation on when a person comes in and purchases a piece of property, and then and their bundle of rights is clearly defined, and then the city moves to take some of that economic benefit away. And I respect the city's opinion, but that would be up to other residents if they choose to litigate on that, if whatever happens here on this. But I'm in concurrence here with my colleague, Commissioner Elmore, on the points that he brought up. I think we had a comment about the breweries about spot zoning. That's what this kind of seems like. I know it's not zoning, but it just seems like we're just picking one area of the city, and we're giving different rules, and who knows when the next one comes up. But I think for me overall, we haven't even give the ordinance 15 really a chance to kind of sink in there, and I think we need to let that work through and see if that cleans up a lot of the mess here, or a lot of the complaints, let's put it that way, that the current residents have. So I can't support this, and I'd like to see the ordinance that was just recently passed being able to get full effect and see what transpires after there's more time to see how that works.
Great, thank you. I'll just ask staff a question about what little bit Commissioner Lowry was asking about. Was there looking into this a little bit further about what he's saying, giving us a chance to kind of work its way through the process? Are we needing to tackle this before Coastal Commission puts it on their agenda? Since we've already submitted the other part of this that this commission actually said no to, but the council then took up later and did their modifications with. Is there a desire to put some of what we're discussing tonight in with that? And is that kind of why we're discussing it now, or is that a timing issue, I guess?
Sure,
is my question.
sure. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Wigan. First, I just want to add to Assistant City Attorney Yolanda Summerhill's comments about property rights. Well, one thing to keep in mind, too, that this is actually a permit program. It's a permit that the council has decided to implement. So the council implements a program, and they can remove a program. So I understand that the arguments about property rights, but again, this is just for rentals less than 30 days. This we cannot control because it is a property right rentals for long-term, anything beyond that 30 days. To clarify, to kind of add to Commissioner Lowry's comments with regards to looking at giving this ordinance a chance, the council absolutely deliberated on that issue and agrees that it just needs the ordinance, the main ordinance that was adopted, needs some time to kind of get flushed through, and we need to get through that kind of busy summer season so we can see what works, what doesn't work, what's our staffing levels, what are their fees, and we've explained that to the city council. But the city council also wants to be responsive to those residents on Newport Island. They understand that the main ordinance needs time to process, and they're giving staff that opportunity to work with the main ordinance. But Newport Island, again, it's a special carve out that the council wanted to address. There were a large number of residents that have spoken to the council, have come to their public hearings. And the council felt, and again, it was a majority, felt that they should go ahead and tackle this item now while we're still addressing short-term lodging. So, and not a perfect science, clearly, but I believe that the council has did take the time to kind of think this through and decide that it was time just to go ahead and address Newport Island separately from the rest of the city.
Great, thank you. Any other commissioners want to ask more questions, or? Yeah, Commissioner Rosine.
I think my biggest concern about what I'm hearing tonight is that I hear mostly about an enforcement issue. And my concern is that enforcement has been historically reactive. And do we have what's necessary, or does staff have what they believe is necessary, the tools to actually enforce this and let the ordinance work for Newport Island and for the city?
Thank you, Commissioner Rosine. Of recent, the council has looked at this ordinance and says staff needs more staff. Staff needs more resources. So we are staffing up on the code enforcement side. It takes us time. We go through a process to staff up. We're in the recruitment process right now for one additional code enforcement officer. We are trying to get some contract staff on board. that takes us time too, unfortunately. One thing to keep in mind that the council authorized staff to go ahead and implement a 24-hour hotline with regards to short-term lodging. That was just released in October. We've had maybe about 30 phone calls to the hotline. That hotline gets pushed out to the community on a regular basis. Just as a reminder, please call this number if you have complaints with regards to short-term lodging. All this does take time to build up with the community so that they know that there is a hotline out there and that staff is working through with the enforcement side of it. It's all new, but we are staffing up.
I guess to add on to that with the reactive approach, if a neighbor's telling on another neighbor or by calling the city, at some point there is some animosity going on when it comes to that. So you're kind of pitting neighbor against neighbor versus, having, and I think that is something that's going to be big if somebody really is living there versus somebody who isn't living there. And while it was pointed out that if you're not really living there, you're not allowed to have it, but if you say that you are and if there's no evidence that says you aren't, then you can continue on. So I think I take a little issue with having to live on site. I'm happy with a cap. I'm kind of sensing this commission's going the route that we went when we discussed this item the last time. But I'd like to see, maybe if there could be a common middle ground we could come up with and maybe just capping the limit where it's at, but allowing the permit to exist if you don't live on site, meaning you can either live on site and rent out or you can live somewhere else and rent out. So I'm just kind of trying to gauge the commission. Maybe we can come to some common ground because I'm sensing we're heading down a path we did the last time. And I just want to see if we can maybe go beyond that and give something to the council that it seems like they want to do something here. But, obviously we're kind of filtering it out, and that's the ask. That's our job, our duty to kind of hash it out here tonight to see if we want to make a recommendation to council. Commissioner Rosine.
I could get behind the idea of moving forward with this with the removal of the concept of someone having to live on site.
And that's pretty much what this comes down to. It is sending that to coastal staff. If I'm wrong, that's what we're asking tonight. Is do we have to have somebody have to live on site to get and continue their permit, and while everyone else, it weeds out those that don't live on site, and it also puts a cap on any new issuance on Newport Island.
Your decision this evening is really just a recommendation to the city council.
Sure. But I mean, those are the only really topics that
that's correct.
We're dealing with. So we either say no to all of this, or we say, make that little tweak, that modification, and that's really all we can do up here tonight. So I appreciate that, Commissioner Rosine. Anyone else want to? Commissioner Klostermeyer.
To me, it seems like of the 18 short-term rental units or lodging permits that are issued out there, that there are a couple of bad apples. I think a lot of the pictures seem to come from a couple of residences out there. And I think we need to give the ordinance that was passed this summer some time to play out. There is a section in it that's specific to suspensions and revocations of the permits. And it sounds like staff is making steps to hire an additional code enforcement officer. Really, it comes down to there just being 2 violations out there that would suspend a permit. And I think we need to let that play out.
I guess the question too is 18 right now too many? Seeing some of the pictures, some of the evidence, some of the discussion, it seems like there is a problem there. And if only 18 of, X amount of 119 properties, and that's already causing a problem, is 18 too many? But you're right, maybe the time that we give over the summer, would that flush out any bad apples? Would that add the evidence to say this really isn't working with 18, it needs to be less? So
I think there's an overall cap of 1,550 permits that was already put in place, and I don't think it's fair to further restrict one specific section of the city.
any other, Commissioner Kenny?
Chair?
Yeah.
I'm really surprised that the city hasn't rescinded any of these permits so far. And I'm glad to hear you say we're hiring more to go in and look at this, and around the community as well. I mean, other violations, but I tend to agree with Commissioner Elmore and Lowry on this taking issue. If you own it, you should be able to lease it. And if there's restrictions and you violate them, you're going to lose that permit, period. And I think Chair said maybe 3 strikes is too many. So that's where I'm leaning right now.
Great. Commissioner Lowry.
And, with what we're talking about tonight going in our notes, and this is a recommendation to the council, and I think that we're obviously here to look in this as in depth as we can, and hopefully relay our recommendation and our comments to council. And I did read all the council deliberations on the previous time it came up, but there's a new makeup of city council as that comes into play here over the next couple weeks, and they may take our recommendations and some of our concerns here and relook at this of going to the next step.
Commissioner Elmore. Yeah.
I can make a motion.
Sure.
I make a motion to deny the agenda item as it sits, PA 2020-326.
I'll second.
I'll make a substitute motion to approve the item, but removing the owner occupancy requirement where it just simply puts a cap at 18. Seeing no second, we'll go back to the original maker of the motion and second. Call for the vote. If I have that correct by the attorney? Yep.
You do indeed.
All right.
The motion carries 6-1 with Commissioner Weigand abstaining, voting no.
Sorry.
Okay, great. All right, we'll move on to item number 4, motions for reconsideration. Seeing that we just tackled the only one, we're off to item number 5, report by the Community Development Director or request for matters in which a Planning Commission member would like to be placed on a future agenda. I'll call for the Director's report and then after the agenda items.
Sure, thank you, Chair Weigand. I'm going to go ahead and get you a quick update here. The City Council at their last meeting did review the ordinance to address third floor building massing, and they did approve it, so it'll come back at their next meeting for a second reading of that ordinance. The December 17th meeting and the January 7th meeting would be canceled. So our next meeting that we're going to go forward with will be on January 21st. We have 4 items on that agenda. The circulation element update will be just an update again. We may have a 5th item on that agenda, I'm not sure, but looks like to be a full agenda that evening. And that does conclude my report.
Yes, Commissioner Elmer.
Jim, can you talk about just real quick, are there any substantial large applications in the queue for developments?
We have several applications that might be deemed large in the queue.
Substantial, that are going to bring attention.
None that I think that are going to come in the near term here, but we do have several applications pending. The Newport Village project, which is in the Mariners Mile area, we're in preparation of an EIR for that project, and that will come forward probably later in the summer next year. I guess I'd have to understand what large project might be, so my thought is, why don't you give me a call and we can chat about what we have in the queue.
And Mr. Campbell, if we could talk about the virtual hearing.
Of course, I'll do that again. So December 17th, 15th and 16th, we have the circulation element workshops. Those will be virtual at 6 o'clock in the evening. You can get information at newporttogether.com, or I can send you an invite if you like. But it's a Zoom meeting, so it's pretty straightforward. You register and then participate in the meeting that way. So that's on December 15th and 16th.
Yeah, and I think that'll be a little bit more input than the meeting that we were just talking about that we had a couple weeks ago, or it was a little bit more dialogue, more input from the community, right? Like it'll be more.
I think the next two meetings are going to can be a little lively. One of the items is regional transportation and our circulation network. That'll be one of those key themes. I think that'll be on the 15th. And then there are some voices in the community that would like to see changes in Mariners Mile and other roadway segments as well. So I think that might be lively. We'll be discussing parking on the second meeting, and that's always an issue. So yes, those are going to be. There will be an opportunity for a significant amount of community dialogue during those meetings.
Great, and if commissioners could get a chance to participate in that, not engage, but you get just to view it while it's going live. I think the community can recognize that you're in attendance. You can be recognized, and if not, then watching it at a later date, like Commissioner Ketting and I did. And then I do want to hit on one other thing before it might get forgotten, but when we do have our next meeting, it likely will be over Zoom due to the governor's orders out today. Not sure where we'll be a month from now, but it's likely that we'll be doing 100% Zoom meetings going forward, at least into the near future. So I wanted to bring that to the attention of you guys and make sure that you're keeping an eye on your video screen and making sure you're not doing anything you shouldn't be doing on those things. I always got to warn people of that, but Commissioner Lowry had his hand up too.
Question.
Oh.
Yeah, okay.
Staff, what's going on with the, I'll call it 76 7-Eleven gas station? And secondly, I see that the Shell car wash keeps getting kicked further down the road. So take both of those on either order.
Mr. Campbell, I'll take the 76 station.
Certainly.
Over here, Simeon Georges, Community Development Director. So the 76 station, the applicant had some preliminary construction bids, and it came in very high. So the property owner has decided to kind of scrap that project and now is reconsidering just more of a remodel of the existing structure, maintaining the main structure, but remodeling it. So that's what the property owner is considering.
Remodel it for?
Some type of convenience store. Not really sure who's going to be managing it, but definitely wants to
Okay.
transition to some type of convenience store.
All right. Next, the other one? Car wash.
Certainly, the car wash at the Shell station over at San Joaquin and Jamboree, that application has been delayed a little bit, some at the applicant's request, but also at ours. But we're trying to schedule this item for the city council, and there's a lot of business, so there's a lot of other higher priority traffic, if you will, has kind of pushed this back. But that application is still pending and going forward to the city council on January 26th.
And last, Mariners Mile, we spent a lot of time a couple of years ago on various community meetings, graphics, everybody colored on it and all this and that. Is that just been shelved?
That would probably be a good way to put it. Obviously we went through a lot of effort to put together that kind of revitalization plan, if you will, and at that point we're not working on it at this point in time. If the city council directs us to do so, then we'll bring that back.
Very good. Thank you.
Commissioner Lowry.
All right, we don't want to forget a very important item for tonight, and that is that the vice chair usually always hosts a holiday get-together. Well, unfortunately, with the current circumstances, that's not going to happen. So I want to say today on December, I forget what our date is here, 4th or 3rd? Yeah, I will make it a point that we will do a spring or summer event to host all of us as we usually do. So we'll do a holiday event in the spring, hopefully spring, maybe goes out to summer when everyone doesn't have to wear a mask and can be as social as we want. So yeah, but Peter, we'll have to wear the red vest. That's the one requirement. Otherwise, but yeah, so so to be determined. But I have not forgot about that.
Thank you, Vice Chair, for that. Item 6, request for excused absences. Oh, I'm sorry, before I jump to that, does anyone from the audience want to comment on any of these items? Seeing none, requests for excused absences. Are there any requests from commissioners? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned.